Okay, moving on to beveling. So beveling is something you do with, you can do mostly with edges. So I've got this new cube created. I have selected just one edge here, this top edge here, left click. I'm in edge mode. If you right click, you can choose bevel edges or Command B. That's the shortcut. Now when you do that, you get this, your mouse is active, and as you drag it down, you start to create this bevel. Now, this is really cool part of Blender. In this mode, if you don't click anything, but you simply roll your wheel, your mouse wheel, you can increase the number of edges and then increase the smoothness of that bevel. So not only can you make this edge really round like this radius really large, you could make it large with very little detail, or you can mouse roll to increase the detail. You can get a lot of detail in here, and you can also make it a very small radius. So all this before I've left clicked. So let's try a couple of things. Let's do one like this, left click. Now I've created that bevel. If I go to this edge here, click on it, Command B as in bevel, boy, and as I drag down, I create a similar thing, and I'm gonna roll my mouse and create a much less, let's say something like that, and a bigger radius, and left click. So now I've got, if I tab out of here, I've got this shape now where I've got a very, very detailed bevel and one. So it's kind of incredible, like the same function created an edge that looks like this and an edge that looks like this, or a part of the geometry that looks like this. So fairly, you can start to see the versatility of doing something like this. Okay, the next big part of this is this thing called edge loops. Edge loops are used to add detail to your geometry in a very customizable way, right? So if I can start to add a lot of levels of detail along certain areas. So right now I've got a very simple piece of geometry. The only place with a lot of edges is here. So let's look at how this works. So a couple steps. If you right click on the object, you can select loop cut and slide. The keyboard shortcut is Command R, and honestly that's what I think you ought to get used to using, but let's try it. So loop, cut, and slide. Now if you do that, you hold your mouse somewhere over the object, you'll start to see this little yellow line show up somewhere. Now it's going to show up somewhere dependent on where it thinks you want this quote loop cut to exist. So I'm gonna hold it to where it looks like this. So I'm holding it now, so it's gonna create a loop cut along this whole edge. If I left click, I want you to notice that it created an entire edge all the way around the piece of geometry. It recognized that as a continuous piece and created a loop. Okay, let's do another one. Command R, and holding the mouse until you get it to be where you want it. So let's say here. And if you left click, you have the control to move that loop cut somewhere. So I'm going to bring it down here and create some geometry there. Command R and left click, and now when I've left clicked, I've created a movable loop. I'm going to move it up here, add some geometry, and let's add one here. Command R. So when you Command R, it puts it in the center. If you left click and left click again, it will leave it in the center. Command R, left click once, you can move it. Now I'm going to show you something really pretty incredible with loop cuts. See if I can do one back here. Yeah, let's try here. Command R. Okay, so I'm going to create a loop cut, horizontal loop cut here. So if I, before I left click, while it's still yellow, if I simply start rolling my mouse up the middle mouse scroll, now it's telling me it's going to create a bunch more loop cuts. So I can create a bunch right here, left click again to put them in place. And let's do another one. Add it here. I'm going to add a bunch along this axis, left click again. I'm going to add a bunch along this axis, left click, oops. Command R, roll the mouse, and left click. Now, all this geometry along these edges is going to create a more smooth looking piece of geometry when we do want to smooth it, especially back here where there's a kind of grid being created.